So hello everyone, I'm Robert. I'm the Director of Strategy and Sustainability at Brown Finance. I spend most of my time helping our corporate clients, but it's also been extremely interesting working with our soft power team on integrating sustainability into the soft power index and the work that we do for clients over the last 2 or 3 years. It's been really interesting listening to some of the earlier sessions today. It's become clear that despite the economic and geopolitical turmoil, particularly in the last 12 months, that sustainability is an incredibly salient theme. I think if we were to look back, say, 5 or 10 years, it might be that sustainability, at least this year, might have fallen off the agenda somewhat. But it's very apparent that even with kind of war and certainly in the UK, that kind of recession and short-term economic concerns, sustainability is still absolutely top of the agenda. So I'm very excited to welcome a very esteemed panel to discuss that in more detail now. So we have from left to right, Zoe Fitzgerald from C40 Cities, Asbjørn Overgaard from Copenhagen Capacity, and Lisa Barrett from Destination Canada. I'll kick off with a very short presentation just to give you some highlights of the sustainability results from this year's Soft Power Index. So these aren't officially released until tomorrow, so you're getting an exclusive peek here. But hopefully that'll provide a bit of a framework for the discussion that we then go on to have. Okay, so starting with some definitions. So just a reminder for anyone who's not aware, the definition of soft power is a nation's ability to influence the preferences and behaviours of various actors in the international arena, states, corporations, communities, publics, through attraction or persuasion rather than coercion. And when you start to consider what the definition of sustainability is, so meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, it becomes very apparent the ability of sustainability and sustainability-related issues, as covered in, for example, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to influence those preferences and behaviours of actors in the international arena, whether they be countries or cities or organisations at other scales. For example, we've got some illustrations here. So transnational migration, the illegal wildlife trade, climate change. These are all things that nations and even cities have the capacity to influence. And they're also things that cross international boundaries in terms of their influence. So there's a significant scope for sustainability-related issues to have a big bearing on soft power. Then we, just to recap on kind of what the benefits of soft power are and why we want to kind of cultivate it. So at the domestic level, it's for domestic investment, staycations, local goods and services, and talent retention. At the international level, tourism, FDI, business and trade, political influence, and talent attraction. These are all attracting, for example, talented workers or tourists or FDI. These are all things that now sustainability is such a kind of salient theme in both the soft power and business world that need to be carefully managed in order to attract these audiences. So now looking to some results from the Soft Power Index. On the left-hand side here, you have the Global Soft Power Index score for all the countries covered in this year's index. And on the x-axis here, you have the Sustainable Development Goals Index score. So that's a measure of how well countries are performing in achieving their Sustainable Development Goal targets. And you can see that there's a clear correlation between the two. And actually, this is a lot clearer than we see with our corporate research. So strong sustainability performance in the soft power arena actually does have a genuine impact on your overall soft power score. Then looking into that in a little bit more detail, on the left-hand side, we have perceived strength in international relations. And on the x-axis here, we have perceived performance on sustainability, both of these metrics coming from our research. And again, you can see that there's a very strong correlation between the two. So perceived strength in international relations being driven, potentially, by a reputation for acting sustainably. Similarly, we see an even stronger correlation for business and trade, and that's reflective of the salience of sustainability in a business context. But you can see there that there's an adjusted R-square of 0.925, so a very, very strong correlation there. Just a few highlights of the winners from the Soft Power Index sustainability statements. So on the left-hand side here, you have environmental statements. In the centre, social, and on the right-hand side, governance. There's a little bit of overlap, as with all things sustainability. But you can see that the countries that perform best typically are in Western Europe and North America, and also Japan. And that's something that we'll go on to talk about in the discussion in a couple of minutes. Is is it necessarily justified that it's all these sort of familiar names that score well on soft power that get the most credit for sustainability? One point to note is that, as you'll see here from the Sustainable Development Goals Index, despite there being kind of strong correlations for acting sustainably, and there being many countries that are perceived to be making a lot of progress, if we look at the objective picture across the world, many, many challenges remain on most, if not all, of the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's something to keep in the back of the mind, is that it's not as though any one country has really solved sustainability and is head and shoulders above the rest. Whatever part of the world we look in, there's a long way to go. So with that, I'll move over to the panel discussion. Great, so if we start with Lisa and then come back towards me, if you could just tell us more about Destination Canada and your main objectives.
Great, thank you. I'm Lisa Barrett from Destination Canada. We're a national tourism organization, and really our job is to make sure that Canada has a vibrant tourism industry. We do that through influencing supply and demand, and earlier this morning we heard a lot about COVID, post-COVID world, regeneration, transformation, and I must admit, Canada has really been focused in getting tourism back post-COVID. But as we move into the future, and I'm happy to say that we are starting to move into the future, we've hit recovery, we're really focusing on transformation. So we are going to be releasing our 2030 strategy later this year, and it's really grounded not just in sustainability, but a regenerative approach to tourism. So our goal is to have a long and very healthy tourism industry for Canada, and what that means is making sure that our communities are built around tourism in a really healthy way. And we're really guided by our aspiration, which is to generate wealth and well-being for all of Canada and enrich the lives of our guests. And actually meeting that aspiration really means that we need to think differently on the things that we've done in the past. So we need to invite guests that align to our values, not just volume, balance out our seasonality, make sure that we have bottom-up, community-led transformation development to make sure that we have regenerative tourism practices and businesses that are coming through our country. So looking forward to building the future, and really we're focused on making Canada move up that ranking and making sure that we have regenerative tourism practices in place for a really strong future.
Great, and Asbjørn, if you could tell us about Copenhagen Capacity.
Yes, thank you. My name is Asbjørn. Yes, I'm from Copenhagen Capacity. We are the official inward investment agency for Greater Copenhagen. We have been like 35 people, been working with attracting international investors and companies to the Greater Copenhagen region for the last 30 years. And for the last decade as well, we have been attracting international talents to Danish and international companies in the region. And we have like 3 main focus areas, key sectors that we focus in. It's life sciences, where we have a strong sector and a very strong cluster there. It's tech, and of course it's green transition. And green transition is very much becoming our overall focus within for sustainability, where we focus on a two-sided effort, you could say. One is that Denmark as a country has quite high ambitions on CO2 reductions, an ambitious climate target of 70% reduction in 2030. Copenhagen as a city has a very ambitious, came out with a very ambitious target to become CO2 neutral in 2025. We will not reach that target, but the good thing is that if we never came up with that target, we would never have come so far as we are today. So we are about 85%, and we hope it will be around 95% by 2025, but we'll not reach it. But again, that's also what it's all about. I mean, it is setting high targets and ambitions, and then try to strive to get it. And if you don't make it, then okay, be honest about it. And then we put up a new target for 2035 to become CO2 positive. So yeah, and then our role in that is very much to underpin those and actually to ensure that we attract companies who can help us reach those targets. So top companies and talents to help us to reach those targets. That's the one side of it. The other side is we would very much like to bring companies that use Copenhagen and Denmark as a platform to develop, test, and scale sustainable solutions and products to actually make a difference worldwide.
Great. And Zoe?
Yeah, so I'm Zoe Fitzgerald. I head up the City Business Engagement team at C40 Cities. So C40 is a network of nearly 100 of the world's largest cities, made up of the mayors that have committed to climate action, called C40 because we used to be 40, but we can't change our name every time we add another city to the list. So within C40, our main objective with these cities is to support them in cutting their fair share of emissions in half by 2030. So we work at the mayoral level on these ambitious commitments, and then across many different technical teams in all of our cities in how to achieve those through different programs, initiatives, whether it's on transport, buildings, et cetera, et cetera. And then aside from emissions reduction, the other big focus we have within C40 is making sure that that emissions reduction is done in a way that meets the needs of the people that live and work in those cities and is done in a fair and inclusive way, especially for the cities within the C40 network who are already bearing the brunt of climate impacts and really facing issues now, looking at things around adaptation and how we can ensure that we're creating good green jobs in that space, and how the cities can really work with the kind of whole ecosystem of partners like yourselves in their cities to make sure that that climate action is very inclusive. The Lord Mayor of Copenhagen is one of our vice chairs. So all of the work that we do at C40 is really driven by the mayors, and our network is there to support them to achieve that rather than kind of vice versa, us telling them what to do. It's quite a hard network to retain your membership of. They have to do a lot of work to keep that up. So yeah, we're working to reduce those emissions, but make sure cities and destinations can learn from each other so that they don't have to repeat the same kind of mistakes that others have made before.
Thank you. So coming back to Lisa, it'd be great to hear from you about a sustainability project or initiative within Destination Canada that's been kind of really key to what you've been trying to do over the last few years.
And ultimately key is our aspiration, as I said before, to even action that. So generating wealth and well-being for all of Canadians and enriching the lives of our guests. A key initiative, of course, is establishing a regenerative tourism framework and using that within our country and supporting our partners to use and adopt that approach as well too. But what I'll talk about today is our Wealth and Wellbeing Index, which is our way of measuring our success against our progress. So we all know it's good to have clear direction strategies that guide us along the way, but we need to actually measure ourselves against that. And like you were saying, we need to be ambitious in our targets, and we need to make sure that we monitor that effectively. So in Canada, we've developed a Wealth and Wellbeing Index, which is really a different way to look at the value of tourism specifically. So moving away from the idea of heads and beds and hotel rooms and the economy, which is very, very important, but really leaning into the socio and economical, cultural benefits of tourism. So our index is based on 6 different pillars, so we can measure the economy and the vibrancy of our economy, the good jobs that are created across the country, creating year-round employment, the impact on our environment in terms of sustainability, regeneration, protected land areas, making sure that our cultures are vibrant within Canada as well too, and really showcasing what tourism contributes to culture and economy as a whole. So it's our way of talking about tourism differently and really showing the deep and complex value that tourism brings to communities. So pretty critical to bring sustainability into that framework and create a dialogue with not just at the country level, but within our country as well too, with the cities, provinces, and of course we're aligned to various other initiatives like SDGs and the like, but really wanting to shift the narrative for Canada and measure our success over time so we can be a little bolder.
And same question to Asbjørn.
Yeah, we are working, as I mentioned here, it's very dedicated to both ensure that, it started a few years ago here where we made a new strategy, and sustainability became at the core of that strategy, and it was very much to see, okay, being actually funded by taxpayers' money, of course, we should actually ensure that what we did was not only supporting the economy of the country, but also actually that sustainable transition that we need to go through as a country, and that we are very ambitious about. And that's where we have been looking very much into how can we, by actually ensuring that we attract the right companies, the right talent, the right investors, ensure that we will actually assist that sustainable transition locally. But even more important is that you can also be very, picky and just go out there and say, okay, I only want to attract, the very, very, all the saint companies out there, the ones that are already, UN Global Compact and B Corp and everything, and they are all clean and they have all the right things and all the right objectives. For one, it's a very small group, and for two, it's. We would only, we wouldn't make a really big impact. So we have really taken another approach and saying, we would like to attract everyone, but we would like to invite them on a sustainable journey with us. So use Copenhagen, use a setup, use a footprint in Copenhagen to actually make a difference for your company. So many of the companies that we attract from Asia, from the US, they don't have that profile necessarily to begin with. It's not something that's very high on the agenda, especially not from many Asian countries. It is in some ways, but it's not in the same ESG framework as we're talking about in Europe. And then we actually try to convince them that, okay, if you set up something in Copenhagen, then let us use that as a spearhead, as a place to test some of these things for your company, and actually then it can be scaled back to the rest of the organization. We've done that quite successfully in quite a few cases, and it's very interesting to see how you can also make small steps and some changes, but inside some larger corporations.
Okay. And Zoe, in your case, I think you've probably got at least 40, if not more, possible examples to draw on. But is there a case study that you'd call out?
Yeah, we've got a lot of different examples. I guess maybe just one thing to pick up that we were working on very recently within my team. So obviously within C40 we work with the sustainability leads or the environmental leads within our cities as the kind of first contact point. But we're increasingly looking to make sure that climate and sustainability is embedded throughout the rest of the city department. I think for any of you here that work within local government or within cities, you'll know that they're still very siloed. A lot of the work that we do is bringing together teams within the same city to have a conversation for maybe the first or second time. So looking at embedding the climate action plans that all of the cities have developed into that work. So last week we were in Cape Town with 6 different cities from across Africa region, specifically with teams that look after stakeholder engagement, economic development, or their kind of branding destination partnership type work, bringing those cities together for a workshop about why climate issues are important for those businesses and how they can kind of integrate that city planning into the discussions with those companies. So for a lot of those cities that we had last week, we had Freetown, Sierra Leone, Accra, from Ghana, and then some South African cities. That was some of the first time they'd really in-depth discussed what's happening in the climate space for corporates and companies and why that's applicable to their work. So it was really interesting to kind of have those discussions and bring those other teams in. And we're doing that across different areas as well, like procurement. We've been working with Oslo as well, who are kind of leading the way in climate budgeting. So making sure that the city's budget, everything that's spent, every financial decision that's made is done in line with the city's climate target, which many of our cities are starting to roll out as well. So it's not just looking at kind of ticking a box on climate targets or sustainability, but how we can embed that through everything else that the city's doing as well and make sure those considerations are really built on.
That's a really interesting observation. That's something that we found at Brand Finance as well, both in our soft power and our corporate work, that sustainability has been a kind of very salient topic for people throughout a lot of the organisations we work with for really quite a long time. But we still find situations like that where there's a very limited internal dialogue going on, or there's limited action because people aren't exactly sure what they should be doing or how they can collaborate internally. And so it's very important to have that more organised process through workshops and other kind of projects to kind of really drive that forward. Okay, so moving on to the kind of core topic of this discussion. As I was showing, there's sometimes a bit of a mismatch between the nations or the cities or other governmental levels in terms of perceived sustainability and the progress that those organisations are actually making. Are there any sort of examples that you would call out, maybe cities or countries that don't really get the credit that they deserve? For example, one I was just having a look at, we had Bhutan speaking earlier on today, undoubtedly doing extremely good stuff, both in terms of fostering sustainable innovation, but also in terms of protecting natural environments as well. And yet, in our research, they're really very much mid-table in terms of perceived sustainability. Are there any sort of examples that you would call out? And if you want to be more controversial, maybe examples where a country is getting too much credit for what it's doing. So maybe I'll start with Zoe this time.
Yeah, I think a lot of the work that we're doing within C40 is trying to elevate some of those stories from the cities that we work with, because we work with such a breadth of different kinds of cities and mayors from kind of all ends of the political spectrum, working to pick up those ideas and build that perception is a key part of what we do. I think, obviously, the usual kind of suspects in Europe, especially with the greener cities, are sometimes, I think, when you dig into things, maybe a little more elevated than in terms of what's happening on the ground. If you look at the consumption-based emissions, which is something we're doing a lot more work on in C40 in terms of how much people consume and how much they emit within the city. Those cities typically have people that live much more carbon-intensive lifestyles and need much more of a shift. Whereas a lot of the cities that we're working with in Global South, who are under huge financial pressures, many, many other crises, or facing flooding, major heat waves, all the issues of climate now, are doing fantastic work, but definitely wouldn't be places that you would maybe have top of your list of sustainable destinations or green cities. So we've just, our new co-chair at C40, we run under a co-chair model whereby we have a mayor from Global North and Global South who kind of set the direction. Our new co-chair is Mayor Akisoya from Freetown in Sierra Leone, and she's really, really kind of trying to bring that message and voice to lift up some of the amazing work that's happening in a lot of cities that really isn't on people's radar or made aware of. So yeah, we're really trying to kind of help those cities build their own kind of brand recognition and perception around that as well, especially as they look to grow their tourism industries and shift towards that, like looking at how that can be done in a genuinely sustainable way from the get-go. So yeah, our European and North American cities are all great, but there's a lot of really good stuff happening in some of the other cities that isn't kind of seen as much.
So is there maybe a bit of an obligation on European or North American cities to help elevate the profile of some of the other cities in the network, would you say?
Yeah, and we do a lot of that within C40. So the kind of whole premise and model of C40 is to build relationships between cities, so having Copenhagen speak to Freetown, or having the mayors meet, or having the technical teams meet to understand what's been done and kind of where to start and how to get there quicker is a big part of what we do. So yeah, absolutely.
And Asbjørn, I won't ask you to say whether you think Copenhagen is too positively perceived, but would there be other examples that you might call out?
It's difficult to. I mean, I think what is clear when you look at the list is that I mean, coming from a small country, it's quite clear that in general, when you talk about perception of countries and the cities around the world, it's very much also about the how well known you are. And of course, some of the larger Western European countries and cities that are very well known from large countries get a high ranking because I think they're just well known in that many ways. So that's maybe also the reason why you see countries like the US in a top there. But I think it's interesting that what you mentioned about some of the countries like Bhutan, for example, where I don't think that's really well deserved that they're not high up on the ranking. But again, I think it's because of an overall that they're not that well known in general. And so maybe people haven't heard about the country, but they don't know what it actually stands for. And that's what we also experience from Copenhagen very often, that people know about it, but what is it actually? And is it the capital of IKEA, or how is it? You know, so we're very much mixed up in Scandinavia very often. Especially when we go, overseas. So that's where, of course, our role is to inform about that. But we experience very often that perception is one thing, but reality is quite different very often.
And Lisa, same question.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, perception and reality are very different. Canada often ranks high. We're perceived in the world as being, a leader. We're well known for being clean, but it keeps us honest, right? Like, we don't always match up with how we're ranking. So when we see good rankings for Canada, we just need to make sure we have the right policies in place, because it is the future that we want to build, but we need to follow through with actual action and make sure that we're not just riding the coattails of our legacy, but actually building for the future in the way we want to be.
We're quite lucky to have both city and national level represented on the panel. And one observation that I've had is that dedication to focusing on sustainability seems to be a little stronger at the city level. So I'd just like to ask the panel, is that something that you'd agree with, or something that you've observed yourself? And if so, kind of what can cities do to pull the countries that they're part of along with them on that journey? So Zoe, you're maybe best place to comment on that.
Yeah, we do a lot of that, and of course would agree that cities are leaders in this space. When you look at some of the data within C40, I think 3/4 of C40 cities are reducing emissions faster than their nation states. And that's the reason we work with cities, right? The mayors are often more able to be a bit more nimble, a bit more responsive, and kind of take slightly more ambitious positions than national government is able to. So where that relationship is close, cities and mayors are great kind of places and ways to demonstrate action and demonstrate that these kind of ambitious projects or ideas can work, especially if you're talking about something like tourism in a kind of city that faces a lot of issues there or has a real big hub of tourism. That's a great place to demonstrate that for the rest of the country. So we do a lot of work to support the mayors in making that argument to national government, whether that is bringing together our mayors across Europe to engage at the EU level for advocacy, which we did a lot of work around last year on the kind of retrofit space, so supporting them to lobby there. And then similarly, now in the US, we're doing some work with our North American cities who are all facing major issues in workforce in order to respond to some of the built environment decarbonisation issues, bringing them together to work with Department of Labour and look at state and national government policies there and what needs to shift. I think the mayors and the cities are often, they face the brunt of the people that are unhappy with whatever's happening or the policy issues that are coming through. So I think I'm more able to kind of express that to national government and the issues that are needed. And then just at COP28, we just saw the launch of the CHAMP initiative, the Coalition for High Ambition Multilateral Partnerships, I think, CHAMP. Which is essentially a commitment by national governments to work with their sub-national governments more closely and looking at financing the national development, the NDCs. So there's more kind of formal mechanisms for that now to enable it. But yeah, we definitely see kind of cities as the driving force in a lot of this space.
Okay. And Asbjørn, is that a dynamic that you'd observe in Denmark as well?
Yeah, for sure. We have no doubt that cities are more ambitious, and it's easier for cities also to work together, internationally. So we see alliances of cities in different countries where we wouldn't maybe necessarily see the same alliances on country level. Of course, I mean, there's also limits, of course, to what cities can do, because there's also national legislation that they have to keep within. But it's just very clear when you also look at what just in our country, that the ambitions and targets set by the city is much higher than the country. And actually, the funny thing about Copenhagen not reaching their target was actually because there was a national legislation that hindered them in actually doing some CO2 carbon capturing. So that was actually, so the city actually could do it if they were allowed to go in front. But of course, I mean, to be fair, there's also something about, I mean, now we're just having a big discussion in Denmark on how to reach our targets, and then especially how does the agriculture and farmers actually contribute, and paying out CO2 taxes, etc. And of course, as a city, you don't have to worry about the farmers because they're not in the city, and you don't have to worry about all the huge production sites, etc. But of course, and you share facilities, you live in smaller squares, etc. So there's no doubt that I think that cities are actually front runners in many ways, because there are many ways of actually where you can see that sharing resources is one thing that you go in front in cities and can do.
I mean, I guess you don't have to worry about it unless you're a resident of sort of Paris, maybe, where that debate around environmental policy has sort of been brought from the rest of the country into the cities recently. So there's clearly some tension there. I mean, I think we're in danger of all agreeing with each other here. So I don't know whether Lisa's got a contradictory viewpoint here.
No, I will not contradict that. I think, cities are incubators, and just by the nature of their mandates, they can implement quickly, they can respond to their citizenry, they can share information. So I'm not going to repeat what's already been said, but it just shows the power of sharing that information and doing the work that you do, so people can learn from each other because they can be nimble. And to your point as well, too, we all have a role to play. So cities can be incubators, but it goes up to a regional and to a national level. So we all just need to make sure that we're working together.
Okay. And then I'd like to pose the same question, but in relation to your interactions with the private sector. So do you find that businesses are sort of leading the way, or do you have to kind of pull them with you? Could you give a bit of a flavour of your kind of interaction with business?
I think it's both ways. Private sector can respond very quickly to consumer demands, and when consumers demand sustainability, regeneration, they respond, right? They can make it their bottom line, and they can make it appealing to consumers. On the other hand, there's some gentle guidance that's needed as well too. In the tourism sector, there's some long-standing players that implementing new changes has a fiscal impact, so you need to make sure that you bring the right tools in place. So I see it both ways.
Okay. And same question to Asbjørn.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. There's no doubt that we work with companies both nationally and internationally, and of course sustainability is many things. One thing is climate reduction, but of course it's also about gender equality. It's about many other issues as well. And I think we see that private sector is very engaged and actually would really willing to contribute here. But it's also, I mean. It's also important to of course ensure that there's still a match between still being able to have a profitable business and then you make a sustainable transformation. I think we have proved that is possible. I think there's been a lot of challenges along the way, both with COVID and now with war in Europe and many other things that has actually been steps on the way that are really not helping the journey, but I think it's proven that many of the companies that we have chosen this path of a sustainable transformation has actually been quite successful, and that's of course also what we try to preach to those international companies coming to Copenhagen, saying, okay, this is a path that we would recommend you to go down, and we will help you all the way because we actually see that there are some good benefits for you here.
Okay. And Zoe, your role is focused on city business engagement. So what would your reflections be?
Yeah, I think we're always kind of surprised at the level that some of the conversations start at when we're looking at some of the business engagement efforts within cities. I think most businesses now have an awareness of sustainability issues. They might have science-based targets or net zero plans in place. But the recognition and understanding of what the city climate plans or ambitions are, where those businesses are based, is not always there. So often in workshops or convenings, we'll get the city and a group of businesses in the same room. And just the initial discussion of kind of where plans align and what the targets are is often kind of very base level. So there's tons of kind of opportunities to work more closely together within cities that is maybe not always taken advantage of. And I think one thing that we're really trying to encourage our cities to take more of a role in is recognizing their soft power, I guess, in the space of convening and bringing private sector together. So oftentimes bringing businesses based in the city that might be competitors and not naturally speaking to each other about the challenges that they're having in meeting their sustainability targets, bringing those businesses together in a room to all kind of look at, okay, what's the challenge we're trying to solve? How can we do that together? Whether that's things like group purchasing of renewables or sharing kind of EV charging infrastructure, those kind of things at a very basic level. And also supporting our cities to do a better job of kind of shouting about the market opportunities that they're creating through sustainability policies. One of the examples we like to use quite a lot is in New York, where they introduced a local law around building decarbonisation, so the emissions that some of the bigger buildings are able to produce has created a kind of estimated $20 billion retrofit market. So really talking to private sector about what's happening in cities and having that kind of two-way conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. If I can do just a very brief plug for some of the work that I've been focusing on, we've got our Corporate Sustainability Perceptions Index being released next week, and one of the key findings from that is that even from individual businesses, if they can create a better perception for sustainability, they can have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of added value. And so one of the best ways to do that would be to form part of a network, for example, with a city. So yeah, there's undoubtedly kind of a lot of value for businesses there to differentiate themselves. I don't know how we're doing for time, actually. I can't see a clock. Zoe, I don't suppose you can give us a time check. 15. Okay. Well, in that case, we probably have enough time for maybe one or two questions from the audience, if anyone would like to ask one. Okay. Well, maybe I've put people on the spot a little too much. So, in which case, I have one more question for the panel, which is it's easy to get a bit sort of downbeat when talking about sustainability because there always seem to be so many challenges remaining. But what gives you cause for optimism, Lisa?
Honestly, the fact that we're here having this conversation and sharing information, I think we have to be optimistic. Humans are creative. We need to solve this problem. We have to be optimistic, otherwise we'll just give up. What's the point? So the fact that we're here having this conversation, sharing, building networks, sharing information, we'll build better and stronger together. And it's really the only way to do it because there's cool things happening all over the world. And we need to elevate those stories so we can truly learn and really benefit, not just for our own nation, country, city, but the whole world. So I'm feeling rather optimistic today just by the nature of being here.
Great. And Asbjørn?
It's very easy to become a pessimist when you look at the numbers, because no doubt we're not on the way to 1.5 degrees. We're on the way to 3 degrees or something. So it's really, really bad when you look at numbers and thinking, okay, and with all the policies set right now in the world, we will never reach 1.5 and it will be catastrophic around the world, of climate crisis, etc. So if you look at that and just think, okay, I just give up, go to Dubai and use some air condition and burn some oil, then of course, as you said, it's not in our human nature. We of course need to be optimistic. We need to continue to fight. I'm very optimistic, not because of the numbers right now, because of what is happening on the research and development, what is happening on new fuels, all types of technologies, etc. And also because of all the young people. Because what we see right now is that a young generation that is extremely passionate and very, very value-driven, and is really, really focusing on working for the companies that actually behave right and actually doing the right things in the world. We can see that when we attract young people to come to Denmark, they come because they really see that they can make a difference there, and they want to come for that reason. And they don't want to work for companies that are not, living up to their responsibility. We also saw it in our own organization where we tried to impose something around a new focus on sustainability. I mean, it was a group of young people that maybe really made a bottom-up process and really drove it and did a lot of good things and initiatives, on their own, and they all loved it, and they all say, okay, this is the reason why we work here, and this is the reason why we love it. So I'm optimistic for that, the young generation and technology.
And Zoe?
Good. Yeah, I mean, building on the kind of numbers is obviously not a great cause for optimism, but I feel very lucky in the role at C40 and the work that we get to do of engaging with city officials from all over the world working on these challenges, who are all kind of facing all of the immediate issues that we're looking at, whether it's economic crisis, crime, homelessness, whatever, in their cities. But the climate issue has so many incredibly passionate, dedicated people working on it, that every time we meet with them or hear about the new initiatives or any of that kind of thing, you can't help but be optimistic that there is so many incredible people working on the issue that, will at least make some headway.
Yeah, well, on that optimistic note, maybe we'll wrap up there. So I'd just like to thank the panel for joining us, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hello again. I may invite to the stage Todd Babiak, who is the CEO of Brand Tasmania. This is a global soft power summit, but by no means are we discussing the soft power of countries. We are also discussing the soft power of regions, of cities, of all the different kinds of place brands, and even the smallest of place brands in the most remote part of the world can have soft power and build it. And that's what Todd is going to be talking to us about. Seize your Cinderella moment, the soft power opportunity of smaller place brands. Please welcome.
I'm actually not from Tasmania, I'm from Canada. I'm from a region of Canada called Alberta. It's a province, and some years ago, Alberta's tourism campaign was Remember to Breathe, and beautiful photos of the Rockies, people doing things in the Rockies, and the soft power, I suppose, in the minds of all the people we're speaking to from Alberta was this. The problem was it wasn't really united with that, which is the #1 industry in Alberta. It's called the tar sands or the oil sands. It's really the #2 oil reserve in the world. And more NGOs were telling this story at the same time as Alberta was telling this other story. And it didn't really come together, which haunted and inspired me all at the same time as I was becoming a consultant. And I ended up, after doing a bunch of the kind of work we all understand that we're all talking about, I ended up in Tasmania. They reached out to me, and I got to come to Tasmania. And what we did in Tasmania is we sat down, and I'll show you a little slide later. We sat down in the end with about 450 people, using statistics to get a broad cross-section of Tasmania, and asked them in cafes and libraries and other places, one-on-one, over an hour, about what makes Tasmania special. Why are you here? What are you most proud of, least proud of? What would break your heart if you had to leave? But the first awkward 5 minutes of these conversations with a funny accent guy, it was hard for people. And what they wanted to say about Tasmania that was special is what they'd heard the government tell them to say over many years, which is Tasmania is clean and green, which is a lovely rhyming phrase. And as you can see, this is Tasmania, and it's clean and green. It's not a lie. The problem is, if it's a problem, as we're trying to stand out as this small place, about 150 places around the world say what makes them special and unique is that they're clean and green. It's hard to stand out when very few people even know about Tasmania. David's here from New Zealand. We're going to hear from him this afternoon. In Australia's mind, by the way, Tasmania is part of Australia, if you didn't know. Australians would see Tasmania as a little bit like New Zealand in lots of ways. And you'll hear the phrase clean and green in New Zealand too. It's one of those places. But if you Google New Zealand clean and green and click images, you don't always get something great. In fact, people use it as a cudgel to go after you because human beings live in New Zealand and they do things. It's the same in Tasmania. Often what you'll find when you click images is salmon farming, which is very controversial in Tasmania and in other places as they think about Tasmania. So how do you bring all of this together? This is a problem we've tried to solve. The issue with clean and green or any phrase like it, and we've all heard a million of them, when we hire an ad agency to give us our brand, they'll often just open the cupboard and give it to us. It's actually a word or a phrase that almost any place could use. We really tried to avoid that with Tasmania and to focus in on what can only happen in Tasmania. Tasmanianness, Tasmanian culture, the people who live there, and their desires, their dreams. And so what we've tried to create our synonym for the place brand, I suppose, of Tasmania is this. It's this unifying cultural expression that we had to build with Tasmanians. We couldn't invent anything. And an agency will often do this much research and that much tactics. We wanted to do the opposite. A lot of research, and let's think about the tactics later. And so those interviews I told you about, we've continued doing them to make sure that we're still tapping into Tasmanians. 4.5 years later, we've just done another round to make sure we still are telling the Tasmanian story that Tasmanians tell. And happily, 4.5 years later, it's exactly the same. If you're doing these processes correctly, it won't really change all that much. And what I found unique coming to Tasmania after doing this sort of work in other places was that people often began telling the Tasmanian story or their story with obstacles and hardship. It's an isolated place. It's been difficult. It started as a penal colony in lots of ways, and it started with genocide. The Tasmanian Aboriginal population was decimated by those early colonists, and people would tell this story in lots of ways. It was baked into the way they thought about their place. As well, globalization was really hard on Tasmania. Tasmania used to build a lot of stuff for a lot of people around the world, and suddenly when it was cheaper elsewhere, whole industries, whole communities were destroyed. And this had a psychological effect on people in Tasmania that continues to this day. A lot of people will point right back to the convict heritage, but today certainly they will say, my father, my grandfather, my grandmother had this job for life and it was interrupted by outside forces and it hurts. And I don't know what to do about it. And another thing, when I came to Australia, I'd never heard the phrase bogan before. Does anyone know the phrase bogan? A few of you know this phrase. In Canada, we might say hoser or sometimes redneck. It's redneck adjacent. But people in Australia will almost see Tasmanians as second-class Australians. They make fun of them. They mock them. There's this strange metaphor I had to have explained to me about two-headedness, which is an incest joke. And people would tell me this with a smile on their face, but they would admit that it was really difficult to grow up without pride, without confidence, without a sense of aspiration, without even fitting in the Australian story. Tasmania is often left off the map when you see an image of Australia during the Olympics, say, we'll just leave Tasmania out. And it hurts people. As much as they smile about it, they do say, this has an impact on me, my family, my children especially. But when we actually got to the turn in the story, what was it that they were most proud of? They would use the adjective. They would say, despite all of this, or maybe because of it, because it's hard, because of these obstacles, because of the way they think about us, and the way we even think about ourselves, we had to work harder for everything. We had to be more inventive. We had to be more creative. It wasn't easy in any way, and that's what's Tasmanian. And when we heard it as an adjective rather than a noun, we realized, well, maybe that's everything. We don't have to go through the laundry list of values, integrity and sustainability and innovation and a go-forward basis and all the words we all hear in corporate boardrooms. Can we take all of those adjectives and squeeze it into the word Tasmanian? Because no matter who we spoke to, they had a very sophisticated idea of this word. It was already a brand filter. So as soon as we heard that, we'd say, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by Tasmanian? Well, they might say, for example, they used to say 50 years ago we couldn't grow wine. We couldn't have an industry here in Tasmania. We had some, but it was terrible. It's easy on the mainland of Australia. It's so sunny. The grapes are so big. It's so easy. We would have to work harder to do it in Tasmania. The grapes would have to work harder. Our climate's tricky. But we did work harder, and the grapes worked harder. And they might tell a story of a man, Joseph Cromie, who arrived as an immigrant and refugee, who started with $20 in his pocket and built this beautiful, elegant winery. And they would say, and stranger, foreigner, I don't know if you've tried it, but you should really taste our Pinot Noir and our sparkling. We're doing pretty well against the French. And that is the way that Tasmanians would tell their story. And the tone of voice was unique. The way they did it, they wouldn't say world class. This is Derby. It's a little town in Tasmania, quite isolated, even within isolated Tasmania. Once a mining town, ravaged by a flood, kind of a ghost town. Everyone's leaving, the usual regional or rural story, sad story. But a few leaders in the town got together and they said, this is a great place to ride mountain bikes. What if we made it an attraction? And everyone said, well, no one's ever going to come with their $12,000 mountain bike to Derby in Tasmania. It's bonkers. No, it won't work. But they did it anyway, knowing that, true, if it were mediocre, it never would have worked. So they did work really hard. They brought in some of the finest people they could find in Tasmania to design the courses. The mountain bikers themselves did it. The dirt, they call it hero dirt. It's really good sticky dirt for mountain biking. And in the end, when they created the mountain bike tracks, it wasn't Tasmanians who said it's the best place to race in the world. It was the enduro racers who came and raced there. And lots of farm families who'd gone from commodity, the big stuff, the lots of stuff, into small, specialty, biodynamic, organic. They said, we're not making as much money as we thought we would, but we're doing something really special. That's Tasmanian. Our tech industry in Tasmania, it's built by people who love nature, and they're quieter folks, but Procreate, a company that continues to build the #1 paid app on iPad, when not Steve Jobs anymore, when Tim Cook from Apple talks about, what's really special in the iPad, he says, they're building that in Hobart, Tasmania. They said, if not for Tasmania, we never could have done it. Even though everyone said, get to Sydney, get to Melbourne, if not London, or the Bay Area, or New York City. And so they've used this, and it's the way they already tell their story. We just had to tap into it somehow. What Tasmanians have told us when you speak to them is they don't want this. The usual exponential pattern of growth is not what they're looking for. This is why they're in Tasmania. What they ultimately want is small, special, growing. And we've tried to keep that in mind in almost everything we do. The other side of Tasmania that I want to talk to you about is over 100 years of hard work, sacrifice, and invention and controversy has led to Tasmania being self-sufficient in renewable electricity. So we have 100% renewable electricity in Tasmania. And that's one of the only big stories you tell. People from around the world came to help us build this hydro scheme. Tasmania ended up inventing the green global movement for politics as they were fighting one of these dams. But Tasmanians can reconcile that. They're proud of it both ways, and right now quite happy that they're 100% renewable. It's a big thing, but what do we do with it? Right now we're expanding. We want to be 200% renewable by 2040. Rather than just get to renewable, we're trying to double it. So that's something that Tasmanians see as special. It's a lot of big stuff that we have to build. We have to invite people to help us build it. And there's a pattern. There's a way to do that. We know how to do it. You all understand FDI. the story that we heard in Tasmania again and again, we take storytelling quite literally. We have no real marketing budget, so all we can do is social. And we tell the Tasmanian story over and over and over again. You can find this in our toolkit if you like. Please join as a partner and steal all of our stuff. But there aren't that many kinds. You can read, Christopher Booker wrote a really lovely book. It's giant, called, he's one of you. He's a Londoner, those of you who are from here. But it's the 7 basic plots. And he just broke it down. When he told his literary agent, you know, I want to go around the world and see the kinds of stories people tell. He didn't realize how hard it would be. His literary agent died by the time he finished. It was this huge thing, but he did break it down into just a few kinds of stories that around everywhere in the world, isolated cultures just tell. The Tasmanian story we heard again and again is a Cinderella story, as Conrad said, but it's never about money. No one comes to Tasmania to get rich, or very few people do. They come for a more meaningful life. That's the break. That's something that we saw right across the board. They know they could make more money and have a certain different kind of pattern of success in Sydney or Melbourne. But the reason they come to Tasmania, the reason they stay, is something else. And so rather than have a list of values, what we tried to do is take these hundreds of thousands of words and squeeze it and distill it down to a page, and then half a page, and then a paragraph, and then a line. Not a marketing line, but a line that allows us to remember how to tell the Tasmanian story. And that every element of this line was, a generation ago, negative. People didn't know about us. We weren't loud enough. Working harder for everything was not positive. You could sell to a 5 or 7 million metro population in Sydney. Why not go do that? And then being different was not something Tasmanians were proud of either. They were made fun of constantly for it. But now things have shifted, and some people from the loud world are looking for quietness and stillness. There are people. And the grit and determination and invention that comes from being from an isolated place, that's something that is deeply Tasmanian as well. And then the extraordinariness is the small, special things. Our economy's all about special things, high-value things, because of the distribution costs at a price tag to everything. And then the lovely, extraordinary decision Tasmanians have made to protect the place. Not only 100% renewable, more than half of our land is protected from development. So we've already met biodiversity goals in Tasmania. We invented the green political movement. There are so many things about Tasmania that give us this advantage. We're already net zero, like I think our friends in Bhutan. So as an organization, you heard earlier, how do you do this stuff, this influence and infiltration work? If you go to our site, it's just Tasmanian with an n.com.au. You'll see the usual stuff along the top. We have to do trade, tourism, workforce attraction, investment attraction, and student attraction. But the only way we can do it is through community action. So Tasmanians are our #1 audience. They tell the story, they build the stuff with and for us. And that's the approach we've tried to take as a small team doing something impossible. And so our friends that we work with in tourism, we have to make sure that they're telling the Tasmanian story. As you can see, Tasmania, it's the same font. We just put an N on it. Our logo costs us $600. So that's what we've tried to do, is to use photography, Tasmanians, and Tasmanianness as the vehicle for this storytelling, and projects as well. We heard from our friends earlier the notion of regenerative tourism or positive impact tourism. The 2030 strategy for Tasmania is all about positive impact tourism. Regenerative is a word that people don't necessarily understand, but we did a pilot on Flinders Island, which is an island within Tasmania, and you could Google it. It's called the Islander Way. And we tried to take what is usually a destination marketing plan with 30 things and to actually squeeze down to what's the one thing or the 2 things that you'd like to do together. And they said, we want to do one of those projects where people come and they feel like they've left the place better after having been here. We want them to feel Tasmanian. We want them to feel like islanders. That's why we go to France, isn't it? To feel French for a week. So can we do that? And can we give them something to do? And we knew our friends in the Faroe Islands had already done the clothes for maintenance, which is so clever. And so what they're doing on the Faroe Islands with the Islander Way is they're inviting people to help them rebuild the Flinders Trail, and they're working on a circular food and waste management program. So it's a lovely way for you to be one of the locals and to leave the place better. So it's not just tourism marketing. We do that as well, but it's tourism action as well. You don't even try to read this, but the important line when we do our research that comes up again and again is 2/3 of Australians will say they will pay more for anything Tasmanian because they just think it's going to be better. Charismatic people making special things. So we want to take full advantage of that. So really our trade strategy is it has to be better. When we're building, we invented wave-piercing catamarans, we Tasmanians. And so the one they're building now is fully electric. It'll be the big one. Knowing if we just created, those boats, it wouldn't work for us. Our workforce attraction audience is tricky. We know that if you love London, you probably won't love living in Tasmania. It's not for everyone. But what we found, the people who do love and stay in Tasmania, they're these ambitious introverts who love nature. So that's our entire strategy. When we come to London or Birmingham and we try to, steal your nurses and doctors, what we find is this is who we're looking for. They're frustrated living here. And we understand, too, there are people living in Tasmania who belong in London. That's okay. We can trade. But here are the people who will be happy. We look at what the Americans, some American cities have done really cleverly. Boulder, Colorado, for example, stole coders, stole tech workers from the Bay Area, New York City, Austin, who just didn't love living in the city. They're not trying to be the city. In Boulder, you can just do some really amazing mountain biking at the end of the day. Code all day and play quietly all night in nature. That's our audience. That's who we're trying to steal, really. Great coders who love to actually be quiet in nature. We get a lot of it in Tasmania. Our university, when we first started our work, when you went to the University of Tasmania page, we're lucky we only have one university, so we don't have to deal with the fights in any way. So the University of Tasmania, when you went to their page originally, it said world-class study, which is what everyone says, or top 2% in the world, which is what everyone says. But now they say this. They say that it is, for 2 years running, the #1 university in the world for climate action. It's small, it's special, it's boutique, it's entrepreneurial, but it's also this. And we know some young people are looking for this. Let's not try to be all things to all people. Let's try to focus in. This has been really helpful for us. And we know, too, as I said, how do you invest in Tasmania? The usual way to do it, we're building pumped hydro, which if you don't know what it is, you can Google what that is. It's a circular system. When you have hydropower, you can be a battery. So you can store the water for when you need it. The solar during the day, that's intermittent. So we can have this backing firming potential for Tasmania and all of Australia. We know how to do that, the big stuff, the wind farms. But that's not where we're going to make the biggest difference. Tasmania, I'm sad to say, and we probably all share this, and it came up in the panel a little bit, Tasmania is probably top 10 in the world in gross per capita emissions. We're net zero, which feels good. We are carbon neutral in almost every way. However, we live a very fossil fuel-oriented life. Australia itself does well on the brand finance sustainability measure, I see, but our emissions standards for vehicles are in line with Russia. We don't do that well. How do we look at incentives? How do we look at transportation, manufacturing, and agriculture? All the small things, and invite people to be a part of it. Tasmania, the nice thing about being maybe top 10 or top 12 in the world in gross per capita emissions is we have all the problems everyone else has to solve with human beings doing what they do. How can we, since we have a clean grid, how can we do some things as you're all cleaning your grids in Tasmania that you can scale elsewhere and build small things, have cool partnerships and build IP and send them to the world? This is just an image of what we're building in Tasmania, one of the big things. It's an interconnector with the rest of Australia. That 200%, it's not just for Tasmanians, it's for the rest of the country to help them meet their climate goals. But what we're really after is what are the small ones? And how do we get partners and investors to work with us on that, knowing that it's not the usual pattern. The usual pattern of FDI is you want to build a scissor factory? We'll compete on that scissor factory and we'll fight our other Australian states for the incentives package. And Tasmania usually loses that game. How can we play a game that we can win, taking our advantage of what we have? This is just an example. His name is Sam Elsom. He's the CEO of Sea Forest. And he has been working with a really special seaweed that you only find in Tasmania called Asparagopsis. And when you take Asparagopsis and you make it into food, and you just give a little bit of it to cows, it reduces methane by 90%. This is the kind of thing we're after. One thing after another, playful things that we can do in Tasmania that maybe we can't do elsewhere. And then how do we partner? How do we invite investment? And how do we maybe work together with our other friends who are passionate about place branding and economic development to make it work? And I know that this is, it said workshop here. And so I'm thinking of something that David Haigh said when Conrad and his team, they were pitching us on how do we measure Brand Tasmania, the work we do. And because we're essentially a client service organization, I figured the only way we can really do it, measure our impact is, as an organization anyway, is by asking all of our friends, is Brand Tasmania helping you? How could they help you better? So that's the honest way to measure our impact. But what is the value of the Tasmanian brand and how can we build on it? That's the conversation we were having. David came on the line and said, a little like Bhutan, no one knows about you. Why would you spend your money and time on this? What you have to do instead is get people to think about you. And so what we're trying to do in Tasmania is do it in a bottom-up way through projects. And I'll give you an example, so maybe we can workshop some things a little bit. An example of the way we've tried to work, rather than do traditional promotion, is when we were having those conversations with Tasmanians, when we asked them, what are you least proud of? What's the biggest problem? What's the worst thing happening here? They often would say literacy. Our adult functional literacy is way too low for where we are as a developed region. And it's a heartbreaker, especially when you think about babies growing up, not reading by the time they get to school. And we all know it's part of the SDGs. It's probably economically in Tasmania the biggest problem. And so what do we do as an organization to do that? We're easing into being way more of a workshop or a lab rather than a promotional organization. So what we did is we brought together the nurses who will show up at your house at the 2-week period when you've just had a baby. And they told us, well, we need to actually build our brand because when we show up at someone's house and we start asking them, who's smoking, who's drinking, is there any violence here? How much does the baby sleep at night? It can be a difficult conversation. We would like to be a positive force. We said, okay, that's great to hear. The education faculty, the education department didn't really know how to get involved in this. The university didn't really know. All of the NGOs, all of the smartest people in Australia had been trying to crack this literacy issue. So what we did as a little organization is let's come together and think about that gift. What would it look like if you arrived at every home in Tasmania that has a baby and somehow tell them the Tasmanian story? So we wrote a baby book called Little Tasmanian, and you can check it out, littletasmanian.com.au. And so when the nurse arrives, he or she has this Little Tasmanian bag. The book itself is designed with Procreate, Tasmanian software, and tells the story of 4 Tasmanians who overcame hardship in order to make something really special of themselves. It's a baby book, so it's tricky. So in the bag, you have the book. You have a little Tasmanian onesie, which starts to build that pride and confidence, and it's adorable. You get a library card, and the libraries are starting to run Little Tasmanian events. And then you have fridge magnets with adorable Tasmanian animals to help you hit all those milestones in your first 1,000 days. And so this was a way for us, A, to reach people who don't normally care about place branding. We try not to use the word brand ever, but to hear the Tasmanian story at an early age, to start connecting them to communities that are already trying to help them, to help the nurses feel good about themselves, and then to ideally, over a generation, raise literacy rates. We've now finished book 2 for slightly older kids because some people have more than one child, we've learned. And so the nurses, as of July, will start coming out with 1 or 2 books. And then the onesie, as adorable as they are, we've learned from the nurses, we need to get babies out of cribs, so we've designed a play mat for them. So Little Tasmanian is a project. It's a way for us to tell the Tasmanian story to local, and then we've had some national and international media around it, and some places too. Can it be a gift from Tasmania? Some places have also struggled with literacy, saying, how can we tell our story to babies and families? Can we do what you've done? So we've shared a toolkit for other places. So if any of you are interested, I'd be happy to share that with you. That's just an example of how we operate. What would you, if you were me, if you were a Tasmanian, you realize you have this opportunity of all this renewable electricity. You're net zero, more than half of your land is protected, but no one knows and it's difficult to get investment and difficult even to move Tasmanians in this direction because all the local incentives are for you to continue with your very fossil fuel-oriented lives. What's the project you would launch? I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear it if, as you've been listening to me, you're thinking, here's what I would do. Since it's a workshop and we have some minutes. David, what would you do? You're so smart. Yeah, we do work with the major industries. So, for example, tourism is an early adopter of this. So the 2030 strategy means we have to make sure everyone who operates in tourism doesn't find this too difficult. You know, if you're driving people around the state, maybe you're not doing so well. And buying credits, we're building a Tasmanian credit system. That's not the best approach either. So what we're trying to do there is there's a guy called Rob Pennicott. He's been carbon neutral for 20 years already. He's already a model for a sustainable tourism, positive impact, and a few others. So we tell the stories of how easy it was for them and how actually people will not only pay more for those experiences, but they don't have the talent and workforce attraction problems because young people want to be close to those brands and experiences. So we're trying to bring everyone along, the major tourism industries to say, this isn't so hard. You can have a plan. We'll help you create it. You can be more Tasmanian if you like. So we're doing that bit. The private sector side, it will happen. We don't have an incentive regime to punish anyone. We're toying with the idea of having something like that sustainable development levy as people come in, but people don't love taxes. It sounds bad. And we'd have to figure out, do we hive this off into a fund or does it go into general revenue? General revenue would never work in Tasmania. So as it does seem to in Bhutan. So yeah, that's the private sector partners for sure. Yes, thanks. And so that would be sovereign wealth funds and hedge funds and everyone else is doing ESG investment or just investors in general? It helped all of us, didn't it, when Larry Fink said, we're not going to invest in anyone that doesn't have a plan. Yes, please. Yeah, thanks.
I think building on Little Tasmania is a really big way to go because I know from my own children and through education in general, they hear about all the SDGs, everything that they're supposed to do, and it's actually not embedded in curriculum. And actually, so it's like raising money, awareness, but actually the doing, so working with your Ministry of Education or local education to start, like it's a generational thing. To actually build it in and get that creativity that clearly is there and help have those young people who are extremely smart and start from the beginning, start from preschool all the way up and then build in that curriculum. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. We haven't really thought of going broader in the curriculum because working with the curriculum, it's Australian. So we've had trouble with that. So what we've come up with is something called the Tasmanian Ideas Lab so that every kid ideally kind of graduates with a business plan from Tasmania, knowing that 97% of our business are small businesses. But even there, it's hard because all we can do is kind of hive it off as a special option course. What we'd love to do, as you say, is to embed it a little like place branding, so it's a part of everyone's thinking. That's Tasmanianness.
In that case, I know the problems in education that's moving most slow in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Is that maybe is an extracurricular?
Yeah.
We actually invest in the fact that every student from the, does it on the side so that it becomes something that is outside of it but inside. And I think that
Great, thank you. That's great. And then, I mean, that's true place branding, isn't it? If everyone in their hearts knows what it means to be Tasmanian and they can take action through it. Yes?
One thing that sort of comes to mind is that this sense of aloneness, that we're sort of on our own. And a lot of the story of Tasmania sort of reminds me of the story of many of the coastal communities in the UK. And actually at a sub-regional level, I wonder that if there's a level, a way in which you can bring that out, to actually say our story is actually, it's unique within our sort of corner of the world, but actually there are other places in the world that have the same struggle that we have. And I think there's something about building a shared empathy and sharing of best practice with some of those sub-regions, because definitely in the UK, I think that's reflective of the same coastal regions where highly seasonal, dependent on highly seasonal economies, access to finance skills and FDI are often left off the conversation when it comes to government support, particularly when it comes to development support. So some of these strands are actually quite similar, and I just thought that something that might be worth thinking about.
If you didn't hear in the back, what he was suggesting is, why don't we, as an isolated place in Australia, work with other isolated regions, whether it's in the UK or even other places around the world, so that we have a bit of a community of thinkers and doers who understand, yes, Tasmania is unique. Yes, that community in the south of England is unique, and we're not going to touch your uniqueness, but maybe as unique places we can work together to build something special, knowing that there is something regional we share. And I'd love to create and work with folks on a network like that, because why invent it? Yeah, great. Yes, sir?
Are you doing any work with location companies? I'm just thinking about the power of something like Overgaard in the States, for example, did a great job in sort of celebrating, quite a dark way, the regionality there. Or I'm thinking of, that the whole notion of Tasmanian is a kind of a concept, isn't it? Actually, another really successful cultural force in the UK was a program called Traitors.
Oh, yeah.
Actually did a great job for Scotland, and actually its sales of tartan, clothing and all that sort of stuff. I just wonder if there's an opportunity to locate a famous series potentially in Tasmania and sort of use that as a lens to kind of shine, an awareness campaign, if you like.
Sure. What he was saying is Ozark did a lot for that region of the United States. What region was that? I forget.
The Ozark Mountains, I guess.
Yeah, I just forget that it's stuck in a state somewhere. It was Missouri, but it wasn't shot in Missouri or something. But yeah, that's a great idea. I wanted to go to the Ozarks despite it being dark and nasty. And so Tasmania's had a show on Amazon Prime called Deadlock, CH at the end, lock like lake. But the sense of humor is so Tasmanian, I'm not sure it had the same cultural impact. But yeah, it's great. And actually, the problem in some ways with Tasmania is trying to convince the film companies to come to this isolated place. So we have to make a pitch to them to say, we'll help you on incentives, or at least we'll match others. But it is the darkness. It is the distance that you want to make something out of. Some people in Tasmania get a little tired of the Tasmanian Gothic, they call it, because of our difficult history that I outlined for you. When you do shoot something in Tasmania, it tends to be dark. As a Canadian, I find it's not dark at all. It never rains in Hobart. It's a sunny, happy place. But that said, there is a hauntedness. We do have a museum in Tasmania called Mona, Museum of Old and New Art. And the founder, this is a very Tasmanian thing, the founder came from a poor part of Hobart. He made all his money in gambling. He's a math genius, so he found out algorithms to make money through gambling. And because in Australia you don't have to pay tax on gambling, he's given back to the community with this thing called Mona. He bought an old winery just outside of Hobart, and it's the most special, craziest museum you've ever been to. He calls it the Museum of Sex and Death. That really helps with art, the art world folks. So we just need the film version of Mona, is what you're suggesting. So I like that idea. Thank you. Yes?
You have the Little Tasmanian project.
Yeah.
Why not the Retired Tasmanian?
Retired Tasmanian, yeah.
That's where what you see is in a lot of communities when people retire, they're mostly isolated, and their stories are the loneliness that they could face after retirement or when they're moved into homes, and getting those stories as either as a curriculum for the little Tasmanian, or, for instance, I'll give you an example of Zanzibar. So when you walk around Zanzibar, you find the older people have stories to tell, and they tell you about how life was before, and you realize it was a very sustainable way of life, and with time it was lost. So bringing those tips and tricks from the past to innovate the future would be another.
Beautiful. So what he talked about is we have Little Tasmanian. Why not something like Retired Tasmanian to help people who are of retirement age make a positive contribution to Tasmania so they don't feel isolated, they feel part of something, and then even tying it, and this has happened in Zanzibar, tying it to sustainability, because it's not just nostalgia. Maybe people used to live a more sustainable life. And I tried to talk a little bit about the Tasmanian Aboriginal population. That is a really special part of Tasmania. The Tasmanian Aboriginal population was told in the 1970s they no longer existed. But there is an Aboriginal population. They're recreating language and culture. And that's something they're really helping with is there was a way we lived before. It was more sustainable. And can we celebrate that? Can we have our version of that Bhutan Declaration be the story of Tasmania that's an ancient one? And so I think that's in line a little bit with what you're saying as well, is people already are feeling this, and maybe there's just a way we can use them to tell stories. And we're doing a bit of that, but we can do a lot more. And I know, again, you're going to hear from David this afternoon from New Zealand, and that's a model, global model around involving an Indigenous population in the brand. Yes?
Sorry, I just wanted to leave this gentleman just said, because link that back to the Little Tasmania and this literacy issue with the older population. I worked on a project where you had the oral library, like the older people recounting, telling their stories from their lives back to younger generations, younger people, and that's another way to connect the oral tradition, oral aspect, but also the reading aspect, and it kind of becomes a full circle, and they become part of the whole thing as well, not just retiring too, but become truly part of it.
Yeah, it's lovely. Did everyone hear that? That's the notion of can you have an oral library to involve retirement age people with those with Little Tasmanian and other initiatives to increase literacy, to tell their stories and to maybe donate some of their time to some of these efforts, because that's often the issue is we don't have enough volunteers and giving. And again, I can see initiatives you could have with the Tasmanian Aboriginal population as well, where the traditions are shared by elders, that oral tradition. So that's a great one. Thank you. That's really good. And I hope you're all thinking of this for your own places as well. I don't want to just be selfish, but we're workshopping some ideas as a case study, I think, is what Conrad and I chatted about. Any other thoughts, what you'd do? You're all smarter than me. Well, I think that's a nice place to end it. I think I've ended a little early, but I think what happens next is we're going to learn about Italian food, so it's probably okay to get rid of me. I want to thank you so much for participating. I know how hard it is when someone just asks you to put up your hand and speak, and you did a great job, and you made this really fun for me. Do visit tasmanian.com.au. Join as a partner. You can spy on everything we're doing. We're a small team trying to do this big, impossible thing, and we've learned already from so much of you. I know some of the faces in the room and initiatives like this conference, and others. So I want to thank Brand Finance for including me, and I look forward to chatting with you all. Thanks.
That seems to be a pattern, ending a few minutes early and surprising me. Thank you, Todd, for this inspiring speech, and I hope we all understand that soft power is for everyone, even the smallest of regions and cities. And it's probably a good time to also mention that from last year onwards, Brand Finance, apart from compiling this study on perceptions of nation brands, actually also looks at perceptions of city brands. There's a Brand Finance City Index launched for the first time last year. We're continuing it on an annual basis, and look out for it around May. And before we go into our lunch break, we have a special presentation for you from celebrity chef Valentina Harris, who's going to tell us a bit more about the soft power of Italian food. It's worth noting that Italy has been recognized in the Global Soft Power Index in every single iteration of the study from 2020 up until this year as the top nation brand for the nation brand attribute Food the World Loves. It's undoubtedly number one, and that's why we're very proud to have a display of food, and not just a display, but you can all taste it during the lunch break, provided by the Italian Trade Association. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Valentina to tell us a bit more about those products. Could we set up, please? Here they are. Ham, cheese, baked goods, olive oil. The floor is yours and the Italian food.
Are you hungry? Then I'll be quick. Oh, well, buon pomeriggio a tutti. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here today to talk about my favorite subject, Italian food. Thank you to everyone at the Italian Trade Centre and Brand Dialogue for inviting me here to share a few stories and my perspective with you. So for those of you who've not heard me speak before, I always feel that I need to briefly explain this very English accent. Most people who've never met me expect me to sound like Gino da Campo's mother, and then are rather surprised when I don't. So I just thought I'd better reassure you. I'm the youngest daughter of a resistance-fighting Italian countess and a fine, upstanding British Army officer who met, quite by chance, at the end of the war, and the most unlikely and intense and very long love affair was born. My siblings and I all grew up in our little corner of Tuscany, surrounded by vineyards and olive groves, a vast vegetable garden, and a pig behind the grappa still. It was an idyllic, rustic childhood that gave us all a real hands-on understanding about how food was grown, produced and prepared. We very rarely needed to go out and buy anything food-wise, as we genuinely seemed to produce everything we possibly needed within the walls of our property. The idyll was periodically tempered by time spent in Rome. My father was nothing if not endlessly peripatetic. And then one day, my father became suddenly very homesick for England and tried to turn us all into neat, polite English children who kept their emotions at bay, understood the principles of queuing, and didn't wave their hands around to better illustrate their point in conversation, but it was all far too late. Instead, he used his shortwave band radio, tuned in to the veritable BBC World Service, to get us all to sound like Radio 4 presenters. The method is very simple. You simply shut your children in a room to listen to the radio for a few weeks, and if they have a good ear, they will eventually emerge sounding like this. But don't be alarmed. I can assure you that in my head and in my heart, it's all going on in Italian. Italian was my first language, and I still do all the most important things in Italian: cooking, thinking, problem solving, kissing, arguing, driving, and so on and so on. I only sound English. I certainly don't feel English. So Thinking about the soft power of Italian food in anticipation of today brought to my mind a phrase in Italian that goes like this: fatti prendere per la gola, which literally translates as let yourself be taken by the throat. An image that immediately and rather unfortunately makes it sound as if I'm about to talk to you about vampires. But it actually officially means, according to the Italian dictionary that I duly consulted, to conquer someone by taking advantage of their greed and tempting them with good food. Now that's far too pompous. Frankly, I actually think that it simply means to totally seduce somebody with delicious, unforgettable, Moorish flavors. Something that Italy appears to be able to do over and over and over again. Amongst the vast memorabilia of a career that spans more than 40 years, I'm a self-styled ambassadress for authentic Italian food, and I champion those amazing producers who make the products that are at the heart of Italian cuisine, always according to the time-honored traditions and mostly protected by legislations such as DOP, the acronym for Protected Designation of Origin, meaning that it relates to food that is produced in a specific region using traditional production methods and is legally binding within the EU, and IGP, which stands for Protected Geographical Indication and is similar to DOP, but less strict, it's less stringent. And apparently there are 656 POD food products, 780 IGP products, and 64 traditional guaranteed specialities in Italy. That's some amazing numbers. Anyway, amongst the vast memorabilia, as I was saying, are the guest books from the cookery school that I ran once, nestled in the hills of Lunigiana, just a stone's throw away from the extraordinary beauty and amazing light of the Cinque Terre, and tucked under the Apennine mountain pass of Lagastrello, leading straight into Emilia-Romagna on the ancient salt route. My village and my cookery school were an age-old stopping point for the salt traders carrying their wares from the coast up and over the Apennines, salt that was destined for the preservation of cured meats, such as salame and prosciutto di Parma. The school itself was in the old inn, the taverna, that gave the village its name, where weary travellers, their mules and their oxen, could stop for the night before proceeding up and over the pass, a place of great history and many ghosts. My guest books are filled with the impressions and the feelings of the people who stayed there with me, my students. And the reason they are so precious to me is that they are a written testimony of the fulfillment of my objective. What I always wanted to do through cooking, drinking, eating and exploring, visiting producers, asking them lots of questions, prowling around vineyards and orchards, and just breathing in the passion for food that is such a part of Italy's precious patrimony, certainly as valuable as the eternal glories of Rome or the serene beauty of Venice. It's as special as the Sistine Chapel, as sexy as the growl of the engine of a Ferrari, or as breathtaking as the elegance of Ferragamo. All I wanted to do was to send people home again, back to New Zealand, to England, to Norway, Belgium, Scotland, Australia, or wherever they had come from, with a true sense of Italy. Above anything else, I just wanted to share with them what Italy is really all about through the most honest of means, through our taste buds. I wanted them to get a real sense of the authenticity of Italian cuisine, to marvel, as I still do, at how a tiny little country like this can have 20 so very different regional cuisines, all with their own culinary traditions, their special products, their unique recipes, and stories buried in a mixture of folklore and history, most of which taste absolutely amazing. I assure you some don't. I wanted to teach people not just how to cook the perfect carbonara, or the most velvety risotto, or the ultimate cloud-like angel burp likeness of gnocchi that levitate on the plate and are never, ever fried. I wanted to teach them how to read about Italy's history, its geography, its sociology, the climate, and so much more, just through what was on their plate. And when rereading those guest books now, I'm absolutely certain that for those who were there, I succeeded. My guests were exposed to the soft power of Italian food and wine from the moment they got on the bus at Pisa Airport, where I served them tiny antipasti and tasters of local wine on the way to the village. They were well and truly taken by the throat, and they were definitely seduced, and they told me so by writing about it. And during the years that my school was operative in that little fortified village of just 39 registered inhabitants with an average age of 85, so many of my guests came to this very special part of Tuscany, it remains well off the beaten track compared to all the more well-known tourist spots of Rome, Florence, and Venice. I suppose that they trusted me enough to come. But there is no doubt that it was Italy's unique seduction technique that also played a role, irrespective of me. And we had a lot of returning customers who still come to my cooking classes around the country in the UK today, and now they bring me their children too. And as a result of the school's success, we were able to employ many people locally. We definitely bolstered the fortunes of the local bars and restaurants. So not only were my guests leaving with that true sense of Italian food culture, but we were also swelling the coffers of the local economy. But what makes Italian food so globally adored and so commercially successful are, of course, the products that get exported all over the world, the ones you're going to taste soon. Products that are imbued with Italy's history, with its geography, its sociology, information about the climate, and lots of storytelling. But who else, if not the Italians, could possibly create a string of extruded flour and water and turn it into the mega success story that is spaghetti, which, as I understand, outsells all the other 652 registered shapes of pasta by about 40%. It's a string of flour and water. Here is a table laden with a selection of around 20 DOP and IGP products from all around Italy. I've selected only a few to talk to you about in detail because you're hungry. And, you know, their stories and their background is as much a part of their power as the way that they taste, really. So you're going to have to taste some of them to really get what I mean. First of all, let's look at mortadella. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole one. It's neatly sliced for you. We're not in a proper kitchen. Mortadella. So this is the very oldest and the largest of all the cured meats produced from the pork of Emilia-Romagna. Mortadella is a product that has centuries of history behind it, going back to the ancient lands of the Etrurian Gelsina and the Gallic Bonemia, when there were forests of oak that provided lots of acorns for the wild pigs, and that is what started the whole huge, enormous tradition of curing pork products in the region of Emilia-Romagna. There are two specific theories regarding the name of this sometimes literally vast, pale, buttery, delicately flavoured cured meat. The first one has its roots at the Archaeological Museum of Bologna, and in particular to a stone from the Roman imperial era that has a carving of 7 pigs on one side, and then when you turn it over, it's got a pestle and mortar on the other. And this gives rise to the idea that the mortadella's name comes from mortarium, the mortar itself, or murtatum, which means meat minced in the mortar. The second theory focuses on the word myrtatum, which is myrtle in Latin, and this herb was the key ingredient for a very popular sausage of the time called farcimem myrtatum, myrtle sausage, which was a famous speciality even mentioned by Pliny the Elder, among many others. So, which name is the original when it comes to a sausage which across the pond in the USA becomes Bologna sausage or even bologna? Mortadella and any of these fabulous cured products, such as prosciutto di Parma, which I also have here, and the delicious salame felino, which has nothing to do with cats. It's not a feline salame. It comes from a place called Felino, and it's only allowed to come from Felino and certain municipalities in the area around it. It's very specific, but yeah, don't be thrown. Nothing to do with cats. Parma ham, as I said, and also from Tuscany, the famous finocchiona, the salami with the fennel seeds, the very soft salami with the fennel seeds through it. All of these go very well with grissini, which are also a protected product. Who knew? But they have a history that's quite interesting. They come from the city of Torino, and the name derives, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, if there are any Piedmontese people in the room, please forgive me, but the name derived from the Piedmontese word gersa, which is the name of a long, locally produced loaf of bread, a bit like a French baguette, I suppose. In 1679, a local baker called Antonio Brunero was commissioned by the doctor of the royal household to create a kind of bread that the future sickly King Vittorio Amadeo II could digest more easily. You see, there were problems with digesting wheat and gluten intolerance even that long ago, and even in royal households such as this. So he came up with grissini, a bread that was all crust, it's all crust, and none of the central soft, stodgy white bit. So thanks to their digestibility and their very long shelf life, grissini soon became popular all over the country and were even adored by none other than Napoleon Bonaparte, who called them les petits bâtons de Turin, and he set up a special regular delivery service by coach to have them delivered to Paris so that they never ran out. The original production method of making the simple breadstick was very complicated indeed. It involved 4 different people, all with very specific tasks. The stireur, who stretched the dough, the tailleur, who cut it, the coureur, who put the sticks into the oven on these specially created long peels, some of them 4 meters long, and then the gaveur, who took them out of the oven again and broke them all in half. It's all a lot easier these days, one hopes, but for anyone who's ever tried to make grissini at home, it really is very difficult indeed. And they are absolutely delicious, real ones, I mean. You'll taste soon, don't worry. Just going back for a moment to prosciutto di Parma, I wanted to talk to you for a moment about the fact that one of the most remarkable things about Parma ham is its symbiosis with Parmigiano Reggiano. I don't know if there is any other product in the world that has this link, it's sort of marriage between 2 products. By law, the pigs that get turned into Parma ham, 2 each, of course, have to eat as part of their diet some of the whey that is left over from the production of Parmigiano Reggiano. You may not be aware that in the course of making 2 truckles of Parmigiano Reggiano that weigh between 36 and 42, 43 kilos, depending, with between 500 and 600 litres of milk, there are also some other products that crop up along the way. It begins by the cream that is skimmed off the top at the start gets turned into either butter or mascarpone. That's where your mascarpone comes from. Then the cheese is made. Then once the cheese has been taken out and been sent away to go and do its curing, sitting in brine for a while, what's left behind are the curds and the whey, just like Miss Muffet, And the curds are turned into ricotta, and then the whey gets fed to the pigs. And the pigs then are made into Parma ham. So you can have prosciutto from all over Italy. Of course, every region of Italy makes its own version of prosciutto. But prosciutto di Parma is specific not only because of where it's made, in the valley of the Langhirano, where the sea breezes of the Tyrrhenian and the Adriatic meet to create this absolutely perfect climatic condition for the curing of the meat like nowhere else, but also the pigs themselves have to have eaten some of the whey from the cheese. So you have this wonderful sort of marriage that's been going on for centuries, and hopefully, thanks to the legislation of the PDO and the consortiums that look after these products, will do so forever. I was also going to talk to you about taralli, because I've noticed that recently these seem to be everywhere. They seem to have suddenly become, enormously trendy. And they have an interesting history too. They're a kind of a cross between a looped breadstick and a pretzel. And they're made out of an unleavened dough of flour, salt, extra virgin olive oil, and white wine. And first you boil the dough, and then you bake it. You can have them plain or with lots of different flavorings, but they were first created in the late 8th century by local, impoverished, but nevertheless very practical and very wily workers in Puglia, who, simply because they were starving, decided to make something edible out of the leftover scraps of dough, but knew that it had to be something that would somehow sustain them through periods of famine with a longer shelf life than ordinary bread. So they came up with these. Over the passage of time, they've grown enormously in popularity, and like many products of la cucina povera, born quite literally out of times of genuine hardship, they have become one of Italy's most loved snacks, and you can now have them seasoned with black pepper, with fennel seed, lemon, chili, and lots of other flavorings. And they're delicious with the Parma ham or the cheese. And finally, because I'm sure you've had enough and you're all very hungry, I wanted to talk to you about balsamic. Now, this is a product whose popularity has never ceased to amaze me and still slightly surprises me. I can't quite get over it. Many years ago, another lifetime ago, when I was just a young commie, making my way through the training process and learning on the job and became cut and burnt every 5 minutes and shouted at. And my classmates and co-conspirators, as women in the world of professional kitchens, had, of course, heard about this stuff. It was sold in Modena, and apparently, we were told, they used it to enhance the flavor of their food, including drizzling it over ice cream. To the rest of us, living further away from Modena, and certainly in Rome, where I was training at the time, this dark and mysterious liquid was a simple laxative. It was a medicament, which was only available at the chemist's, just like olive oil used to be here in this country. And it used to make us, as young trainees, just roar with laughter. The mere thought that such a product could possibly be used to dress a bowl of salad. But hey, who's laughing now? Balsamic is literally everywhere. It's on your crisps. It's in a granita. It's in pretty little bowls on the table for you to dip your bread into. It's even put into olive oil on the table for you to dip your bread into, something that I was never allowed in my restaurant. There is apparently no end to the global popularity of this ancient and traditional product from the city of Modena, the beautiful city of Modena. a product that still remains, like the others, carefully protected by the DOP regulations and by its consortium of producers. And it's doubtless part of the Italian soft power story when it comes to food. Do you want to know how it's made? Do you want to know something about where it's made traditionally before I stop? Well, it is traditionally made in the attics of the grand houses of Modena. Why the attic? Because the attic gets hottest and coldest, and it needs really, big, diverse variations in temperature to be good. It starts off with boiled must. Must is basically grape juice that is just starting to turn into wine. So it's not grape juice anymore. It's not wine yet. It's somewhere in between. It's the sugars and the alcohol are starting to formulate, and it's called wine must. This is taken and boiled down and poured into the first barrel in a row of barrels, or depending upon the size of the attic, several rows of barrels. And the wood is what's important here, because the wood has to be from trees that are grown within a 30-kilometre radius of the city of Bologna. They must be native. And each barrel is a different wood, and each barrel, with its wood, imparts its flavour to the balsamic as you work along. So you start off with a very big barrel, and you end up with a very small barrel. And you put the wine must in the first one, and then you leave it for a while, and then it's moved to the next one, and then it moved down, and moved down, and moved down, and the first one keeps getting topped up. And the barrels are open. There's an opening with a piece of gauze over it to stop the spiders, but they're open because you want it to be evaporating slightly. And so over the passage of time, it turns into this incredible nectar at the end of it. This is for the real deal, okay? This is for the real stuff, the stuff that's called tradizionale. And this sells in these incredible bottles that have to be designed by the designer Trussardi. I mean, are you hearing this amount of detail here that is involved? For dressing your salad, okay? For dressing your salad. It sells. I mean, these tiny bottles can sell for £1,500, £1,200, extraordinary prices. I remember many, many years ago when I made my original BBC TV series, we had to film a segment on balsamic, obviously, and so we turned up in Bologna, and it happened that we were filming, because of the light and everything, it had to be summertime. So Modena was very, very hot in late July, and we turned up at the consortium only to be told that women were not permitted inside the building. I'm sure things have changed since, but at the time, I tell you, it was another life. We were not allowed. So how were we going to do this famous tasting? Well, we had to do it in the courtyard outside by candlelight, and all the gentlemen were dressed in these flowing black robes with these big headdresses on. And we sat around this table, and they basically poured balsamic onto their skin to not contaminate the flavour with anything else, and licked it off. And I found the whole thing really difficult not to corpse. Very, very hard. Very hard to stay serious and, stay with it, because, it's the BBC. Anyway, that is my take on balsamic. I hope you have learned a little bit about the products that make Italian food so special. It's not just the way they taste, it's also all the story behind it and the way they are adored and protected, and the detail that goes into their production and their tradition. So thank you very much. Buon appetito to you all. I'll be happy to take questions. Enjoy your lunch.